Hello, everyone. We have three more people. I was counting myself. Three more people and three more talks. And yeah, we're going to be talking about scaling right now. We're going to be talking about structure and design systems and all of that fun stuff. And first off, I would like everyone to introduce themselves. So, Yuri, would you mind starting? We're going counterclockwise.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
know.
So my name is Juri. I'm from Northern Italy. I'm currently working as a JavaScript architect at Novel, and I'm part there also of the NX core team. And so that's what I'm going to talk a bit about later, but like more soon. So stay tuned.
Yep, and if I see if it's the same order that is on my screen, then I'm next.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'm Dragos. I'm from Cluj, Romania. I'm a web and mobile developer, and today I will Cluj, Romania. I'm a web and mobile developer, and today I will tackle scalability from the perspective of introducing new team members to your code base. So how do you think about it when it comes to adding new people to your team? And yeah, and it will be based on a React Native projects just to like keep things a bit more fun. So yeah,
Just to switch it up a bit.
yeah, just a bit, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm Mads. I'm the principal developer advocate at Div Riot. We are building a lot of tools around the front-end ecosystem, and especially one dedicated to design systems for developers. So this is exactly what we are talking about in this talk, still this guide about what is a design system and how you have to handle it from a developer perspective.
Okay, so since we're talking about scaling and it's such an abstract topic, I would say it may be better for us to have a little discussion on what we think scaling is, just in the terms of the talks that y'all are giving. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, cool. Okay, we can go clockwise this time. Like, what is scaling to you in terms of a design system, Mats?
In terms of the design system, the main issue about scaling is that even if it's easy for designers to build a design system and to distribute it, having the developers to grab it and to develop around the design system and collaborate around it without breaking everything in your final app is something really complex. So we do need tools to build our design system from the developer side, and this is exactly what we are trying to do.
Nice.
Yeah.
What about you, Dragos?
Yeah, so my perspective on scaling, it's the obvious scaling when it comes to, I don't know, resources or users that are using your app and all that. But there's also kind of a back office scaling with the team, and I think that's just about as complex as the user facing one. And you really have to nail that one if you want to a smooth run, I guess, of your app and business. So yeah, that's what I'm interested in right now. So we'll see.
I would say that if you created your app in a more serverless way, like using Lambdas, using AWS or whatever, I would say the scaling of people working on the app in the end that happens to be harder than the scale of more people using your app, because like it will just scale up and down without you even noticing. But like if you get more and more people and you don't give them anything to do, then
Yeah,
that's
exactly. Yeah,
bad.
that's where your business can die. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yuri?
Yeah, from my perspective, especially also speaking of NX, like in our goal is scaling itself basically. So, but more from the development perspective, like in the sense of scaling from the small, like helping even small teams kind of be productive, be fast, but then also be with the team as you grow up, right? Which means like we basically have tools that help you when you then have like those large enterprise monorepo scenarios as well. And so from the next perspective, it's like scaling across different levels. So team coordination, like how you structure your applications within a workspace to make sure that like it's scalable in that sense, that you don't have like one big messy folder where like everyone hacks in there, right? But like that you have like those kind of structure already. And then obviously also like we all know like when things grow, then CI becomes like a big bottleneck, right? So that's the next part where scaling needs to be, like in terms of build speed and that kind of stuff. So
I hope that helped us. We're not talking about scaling in terms of Kubernetes and stuff like that. We're mostly talking about scaling from within. Like, how do you scale your application to be usable for more people within your team to be happier, and for people to just be able to code without, hating their own life and having a gigantic utils folder. The utils folder and making your own Lodash. Don't make your own Lodash. I've learned that. Just use Lodash. Okay, so yeah, it's not good. So let's go to the first talk, which is going to be about design systems. And I'm guessing you're a fan. I'm not going to assume this, but from the talk title, I am thinking you're a fan of more of rock music.
Definitely.
Nice. I'm into that. Nice. Okay, we're going to be talking about design systems up and down, and how to scale your design system, build them from a developer perspective. And Matt, take the stage.
Thanks. So, thank you for being here, and thank you for following this new talk. Yesterday, we talked about how to build things and to handle the build pipeline, and to improve your developer experience. The fact is, when you are working on a new application, you do have to focus more and more, because we were doing still web apps and web applications, and more application in a large sense, because we can address mobile devices and browsers and desktop devices and so on. So we do need to have a consistent experience, and to build a consistent experience for all our end users. So our developers, as developers, we are working with our designers friends, and our designers focused on user experience for a while. And to improve it, they are starting to build a lot of tools and a lot of concept, like the design systems. The fact is, there is a lot of designer resources online that are oriented for our friends as designers, how to build a design system, or to create it step by step. What is a comprehensive design system? There's a lot of resources at Adobe websites and Adobe blogs, but I cannot find that much developer-oriented resources, because this is not that easy to build a design system as a developer from scratch. Because when we just receive the interfaces and the Figma stuff and so on, we are just sometimes lost in what they're supposed to do, how I am supposed to implement them, and how can I share them with my coworkers and my teammates, and how I can improve my whole experience as a developer and for the rest of my team. So let's talk a bit about atomic design. That was a system, a concept that was invented in the past, probably something like 10 years ago, and designers and developers as well are focusing on this concept as atomic design, because this is probably the best one we can handle in terms of design system development. So first, what a design system is from a developer perspective. First thing, it's a collection of design tokens. The design tokens are the foundation of your brand. They are the overall definitions, like the colors, the typography, the font size, the logo, the kind of illustrations, the icons that you want to use, and so on. They are definitely what make your brands unique. And this is what your designers friends are giving to you from your Figma stuff and so on. But it's also a design kit, something like a UI kit that is a pattern, or something like a UI kit that is a pattern or a set of components that you could use in your final application. And this design kit is giving from the designer part to like a collection of different variations of buttons, of input fields, of accordions, something like that. The basic blocks that you want to use when you want to build an overall interface. It's also a components library. This is a direct implementation of your UI kit. And this is exactly what we want to use as developers to implement the interface that are given from the designer side. But it's also a dynamic documentation, something where you can explicitly say what component is, how to use it, how to implement it, how to interact with it, and how your final users will use it in the final views and the final interface. So from a developer perspective, a design system is those 4 items: design tokens, design kit, components library, and a dynamic documentation. And this is your responsibility as developers to implement all of those 4 items. So the design system is firstly here to help your product team to build better software for your customers, but it's also a big tool that we use internally to help the communication between product teams, developers, and designers. So about atomic design, this is a concept from Brad Frost 10 years ago, as I said, and it started with a split of your the definition of your interface. In the first implementation of atomic design, Brad said that there are 5 types. You are first atoms, then with atoms you build molecules and organisms, and you have templates and pages that you can iterate. I will going through them just after that, but keep in mind that you are going from the little ones to the biggest one, and this is the best way to scale your overall interface and your overall application, just because you are starting from the smallest one and going to the largest one. So from our side at DevRiot, we're focusing on design system, and as I said, we're focusing on the 4 components: design tokens, and from the design tokens, we just deliver the 3 all other parts: the design kit from the designer side, the component library for the developers, the documentation side that will improve the communication between designers and developers and the product team. So this is the best way to do it. And everything starts with the design tokens. And if developers are not necessarily able to well design things, I'm not a really good designer. I'm a better developer than a designer. But as a developer, I know how to name things. And this is exactly what we have to do when we want to define the overall application. The idea is that we want to build components that are both reusable and I will be able to use and reuse my component in my application. I want them to be testable in unit test and in an isolated way to just test my components and see how they work. We want them to be customizable, to be able to be adapted to our brand from our design tokens. And we want them to be collaborative, to be able to have everyone in the team, design, product, or developers, to work together on this final components. So what we want is just to make shareable definitions of our components. So let's see how to implement them the right way. First, we start with our atoms in the atomic design definition. Finally, your atoms are your design tokens. Here, this is the screenshot of the backlight interface. Backlight is a tool that we are building at DevRiot that helps developers to build design systems. So you have a section with your design token. Design tokens are just definitions in a common format of the different elements that we use and reuse as variables in your components. They could be font definitions, colors definition, font size, and so on. This is, once again, exactly what makes your brand unique. So you extract directly those contents and those variables from the Figma definitions files or the sketch files or so on, given from the designers directly. The idea behind the hood of that is that we want to work on a common standard format. Actually, you could we do not have a common standard format, but there is a community working group at the W3C, the design token community group, that are working on a common standard format, common standard definition that will probably be something inspired from YAML or something like that. And of the style dictionary library. Style dictionary is the thing that we are using under the hood at Backlight. It's an adaptation of it, but the idea is that you just define in the format that you prefer. It could be YAML, could be JSON, could be whatever you want, to define your different variables and different values associated to those variables. And you are ready to use them everywhere in your application. The fun thing is that you could directly import them from any kind of designer tool, and you could export them to a different platform in a JSON format to be ready to be used in JavaScript or to iOS or to Android and so on. This is the promise from the design token community group, having a standard format that we will be able to use in the developer tools and in the designer tools too. So we could define the design token once and use them in every kind of tools in our workflow, from designers, from the product, from the developers. Everyone are using the same formats and the same definition of design tokens. Then you will be able to use those tokens directly in your application and your components. So molecules in the atomic design system are exactly how you are composing your application from your tokens. Here we just define some buttons, and those buttons are directly imported from the Chakra UI library. And we just have to pass the definition of the tokens to the different components, and everything is styled and everything is branded accordingly to your design and to your specification coming from the designer side. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel and to redevelop everything. Just have to pass the correct values and the correct tokens to starting to build molecules that are advanced components ready to be used in your final interfaces. And as I said, we want to document things the right way. So to do that, we want this documentation to be dynamic. So we are focusing on advanced version of Markdown, like Markdown-X or Markdown.js or so on. And with it, we can directly import our components, our molecules that we want to document, and we want to explain how they work in a playground that is able in the documentation, in the preview, and you are able to see how to use your component like a storybook and how to improve it and so on. So same thing, we use and reuse the components everywhere. We developed it once and we reuse it in the documentation, in the interface, in the final product, everything. So finally, we are just creating our own toolkit, and we want to be able to distribute this toolkit to everyone that will use it after: designers, developer, product owners, and so on. So how to use and reuse it and reuse those components and those definitions in your final product. We are now focusing on organisms in the atomic design definition. So organism is just an aggregate of different components. So you don't repeat your own interface, you are just reusing your components everywhere. Here is just a simple definition like a hero in our web page, and this is just a combination of different atoms, colors from definitions, and so on. We've got buttons that are molecules, we've got links that are molecules too, and we grab it and we just aggregate it to build an advanced organism, so an advanced component that is ready to be reused everywhere in our application, our landing page, our splash screen in the mobile device or the mobile application, or in the desktop too, and so on. So just develop once and use everywhere. This is also a part of your design system, and you will be ready to distribute those advanced components everywhere after that. So we want to externalize all the commands element, but we also have elements that will need to be customized in the application itself, because they are grabbing data and adapting the content and adapting the result to the data. So we are building templates that will be iterated and with some kind of data. And finally, templates are just organisms, so advanced components with different slots that are ready to be iterated with kind of data, like, I don't know, cards, carousels, fact entries, and so on. So you could develop advanced organisms with different placeholders, different slots that are ready to be iterated at some point in your final applications. And those templates are also part of your design system. This is just the advanced version of an organism, and that's all. So after that, you will be ready to finally share your stack, your design system with the rest of your stack. First, you have to focus on the library mode. So everything is distributed in a package, and every component will be ready to be imported and used in every part of our application. We will be ready from the design system package to import the tokens directly if we have to use them in the final application, and to import the components and the molecules, the organisms, and so on. So each time a designer needs to improve some part of the application, he probably will just have to change some content in the design tokens definition, and everything will cascade through every part of your design system, then to your final application to be ready to be distributed. The big advantage of that is that each time you have a modification, your design system will immediately reflect it, and you will have the result re-render in your final rendering previews of your design system. So you will be able to detect any regression, rendering previews of your design system. So you will be able to detect any regression or any change that will not be that useful or that efficient in your final application before pushing everything in the dev stack and having some kind of issues to resolve just because we have changed font definition of something like that is finally broke some kind of button fields preview or I don't know. The other advantage is that we can target multiple platforms with that, just because we are building an agnostic package with definition of your components, focusing on your framework, but coming from the same design tokens definition. So we can focus the web platform, but we can also focus some kind of non-web platform like iOS, Android, or whatever you want. We just have to reuse the same definition tokens and probably the same components that we could export after that to native, like with the React Native, or I don't know. So this is really handy when you want to collaborate with different teams that are working on different platforms, but are all using the same definition from the ground. So designers of high-level tools like Figma or Sketch or whatever you already know about them, and their ecosystem is growing fast. And our ecosystem, from the developer perspective, is also going really fast and growing in many directions. But we need advanced tools to work on the design system part the same way than the designers, because don't ever forget that developers are just users like you, and we need a big improved developer experience, and we don't have to build everything with just a code editor, and we need advanced tools to work on those design system definitions too. Thank you very much. I'm Mads, working at Div Riots, and I'm here for any question if you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a really nice talk.
Thanks.
Yeah, anytime. You did all the work. I'm just here for the congratulations. So we're right now waiting on any questions. Is there anything else you would like to say, or anyone in the chat also has any questions? There's an awkward silence happening.
Yeah, I can break the
worst
silence.
dream.
Yeah, hi. It's the organizer here. So because there are no questions from YouTube, I have to email some questions. So I was working on this stuff, I don't know, like 1 year ago. Then I I figured that what I need user interface definition, then I need styling solution, and then I need like something for state management. And all of this has to be in single markup. So I have one definition where I can declare state, styling, markup like structure and components. And then I built this system, and it's JSON based. So what do you think of like, do you see that the future of design systems or this kind of development is that we push everything to some common format, like some JSON with schema that then we generate from that JSON for different targets? Or where do you see things are going?
Yeah, I see. I guess this is exactly the future of the design systems, just working on externalized definitions of the different design tokens, just because with the design token community group, we are trying to focus on something that will be ready to be used both by designers and developers. And finally, having a simple format like, I don't know, a YAML definition or a JSON definition is something that is really easy to edit as developers with a simple code editor, but it's also a simple format that will be easy to author with a dedicated design editor if designers don't want to edit the code by themselves. And it's also easy to export it to whatever you want. And seeing some things like the vanilla extract project from Magdalene, which is really, really good because it definitely solved the problem from CSS modules by exporting any tokens in CSS variables scoped to the components or globally to the application. This is a good step in the direction of having the definition externalized and just generated to the CSS variables, ready to be used in the styling process after in our components or something like that. So yeah, this is I guess this is definitely the future. We really do need to externalize everything related to the design and to the brand, and just focus on how to use those components, those values in our components, whatever they are.
Yeah, I think I have to share my prototype with you later so you can have a look, because I think it sort of makes sense because it's easy to target with tools, and it's easy to generate some HTML or whatever from the definition. That's like the meta thing in the between.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
I think like one of the main aspects is also the communication part, right? It's like as part of NX, for instance, like we are involved like in a lot of like also setup of design systems, but more like we support it more from the tooling perspective. But I see like what people struggle with usually, right? And it's always that kind of the designer side and the developer side, right? And that tool in the middle is kind of missing sometimes. And recently at one of the clients which we follow along with, like they also started going more in the direction of like having like design tokens and style dictionary, like a common shared language basically, where they could basically talk through that with the designers and the developers. There was no code editor in the middle, right? Yeah. Like both could use their tools, but still like be in sync without having to manually like check whenever someone changed one. And that is really a game changer, I think. So I really like to talk because like you really like captured those points that are most important like in that process. So.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like we have, it's the communication part. I think that in the end always ends up being the hardest part between developers and designers, and you need a common language. And I think that in the end, anyone can edit a JSON if we teach them to, but like no one should be forced to learn how to code, or no one should be forced to learn how to design. But we can find ways to make people edit JSONs, and I think that everything should just be. Honestly, in my opinion, everything should just be a fucking JSON. I think everything should just be a JSON. That's my opinion. I think JSON solves so many problems. It's like everything can be a JSON. It's like if you think about it, MongoDB is just a fancy thing on the cloud, and so is local storage, but in your computer. I'm super in for transforming any JavaScript file into a JSON file. It's my thing. I like it. Love it. 10 out of 10.
Absolutely.
Good talk.
Thanks.
Great talk.
Yeah, great talk. So if no one has any more questions,
I have. He likes JSON. So
of course he does. It's the greatest invention of web development. I'm not even kidding right now.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, the only problem is that it's difficult to put comments into JSON. I mean, you can do it, but it's not nice.
Oh, there's JSON 5 now. It's not very well supported.
Yeah, JSON 5, but you cannot use it to package JSON, and that's where you want to put comments to explain people what you did. But yeah, to get back to the question, I wanted to ask if you wanted to learn more about design systems or get more into the topic, how would you get started? Where would you go, or what would you study? Do you read design books, or what should you read or study to get more into the topic?
If you want to go more deeply into this on the web from the designer part, so but it could be useful just to understand what it is and how does it work and so on. And from the developer side, just I would say going my advocacy job, but use Backlight. Try Backlight. It's a free tool. Just start a project in it. We've got a lot of templates that are ready to be used with different technologies, not only React, but also focusing on Svelte or Vue or whatever you want. And those templates are really nice to just understand how you could figure a design system from a developer side. Just have to clone the start from a template, change some value, see how it interacts with the rest of the components, and it is really useful just to understand by and learn by doing. Just this is the best way to do it.
So one thing I noticed that, I mean, we are software developers, of course, but it's not like we are not the only people designing something. So we can actually learn a lot from architects. And there's a famous architect called Christopher Alexander, and he wrote this book called I think it's A Pattern Language. So it was one of the books when I was in the university, I had to study this book in the architecture course. But I think some of these ideas from architecture or other fields, they somehow map to what we're doing, because we're finding patterns and modeling things and like figuring out what things are, so that we can share them and reuse solutions we found that work in certain cases. So just as a side note, that sometimes it's worth looking outside of software development.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions?
So we can go to the next talk.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the next one. I will disappear.
And he did.
And he did.
Oh, thank you for sharing the book. Then we'll definitely take a look. Okay, so we can go to the next talk. Thank you so much, Mats. That was a great talk. I'll definitely try Backlight. So next up, we're having Dragos, and he's going to talk about how to structure your components, your pages, your everything, to make sure that when the next person joins, he doesn't feel lost and alone. So yeah, take it away.
Yep. Let me. All right. So now that we talked about the future and design systems and design tokens, I want to take you guys a little back in time. And back in your earlier days of development, when you actually implemented your own buttons and not imported them from some design system or or library or stuff like that. And yeah, I will talk. My approach will be a bit more bare bones and maybe a bit more hands-on. So I'm risking a bit, hope nothing wrong will happen, but we'll see. And also, just before the talk, I realized that I have no landing page for my talk. So there's this awesome tool called Canva that I learned 2 days ago. So please don't judge me for my very awkward landing page, but here it is. The most effective way to structure, style, and document your components. Or I should say one way of doing that, because I'm sure that there are some of you that would definitely have more insights than me, but here's a perspective and you tell me what you think. So yeah, about scalability, as I already said, I want to tackle this problem from the perspective of adding on new members to your team and how you can make them not be completely lost when they come in and not waste a lot of time to just understand, just get the grasp of everything. And Because I don't know about you guys, or if you remember the times where you actually had some small personal projects, but whenever I'm working on my small personal projects, actually, I kind of fear getting successful, because that will mean bringing on more people to the team and introducing them to my code base and to all my insecurities within that code base. And so, yeah, success becomes this kind of source of anxiety, I guess. Luckily for me, my personal projects aren't usually that successful, but still, it's an interesting topic, I would say. And to show you the approach I'm talking about, first off, just for the sake of diversity, I will talk about React Native, exemplify this approach on React Native, and I will also like to exemplify it on this basic login screen. So let's say that we want to implement it. And after making all the high-level decisions with the libraries, the frameworks, this over that, and all that, it's time to get our hands dirty and to start actually writing some code. And in order to write some code, you need a file. And in order to have a file, you need a folder. And here's the first dilemma. How do you actually structure your code? How do you arrange your files and modules so that it's the most easy way to follow what's happening in there? And my approach respects kind of this modified atomic pattern, and also really follows that separation between view and controller, and I try to respect it to a T. And what I'm doing is basically at the top level of my app, I'm having two modules, so the UI and the containers. And the UI, basically, I have all my UI components structured on 3 levels, so primitives, components, and screens. For those of you familiar with the atomic patterns, I'm just the middle part. I've just smashed them all together into components and then just kept the primitives and the screens. So basically, the primitives would be the most basic building blocks of your UI, like the buttons, the inputs, the typography, and so on. The components would be those primitives combined into one cohesive unit, so a form or a button group or stuff like that. And then you have like you put all those components together and have the final screen as it appears in the design. And attention here, all the screen, all that the screen has to do is to look good, and that's it. Because all the other logic will be handled by container and will be injected via props to the screen. And that's basically what containers do. So after we have like an auth screen implemented, let's say, we're taking everything all the logic that's tied to that screen and passing it wrapping the screen into the container and passing it through the container. And we handle all the logic within the container. And the advantage of this approach, from my personal experience, is that bugs become really easy to spot. Because if you have a UI glitch, you'll instinctively go to your UI components. And if you have some more complex logic issue thing, there's just one place where you have to look for it, and that's the container. So yeah, once I started implementing this approach, it did save me quite a lot of headaches, I would say. And that's about it about when it comes to actually structuring your code and your folders. And the second topic, after you've implemented this nice little folder structure, is styling. And talking React Native specific, if you are familiar with the React Native way of styling components, it's kind of a pain in the ass, I would say, because it leads to a lot of code duplication, and also inconsistencies are really easy to fall into. And the best solution to this problem that I've came across so far, without the use of external libraries and so on, so a more bare-bone approach, would be the combination of 2 libraries called styled components and styled systems. So while styled components is, well, basically visual primitives for the component age. So it lets you define pre-styled components that you use as primitives for the whole for the rest of your app. And what the styled system does on top of that is that it lets you style your system in a declarative way. So you can do it just like they are showing here. So directly via the props, instead of having to define the style separately in another place. And this actually makes the code look kind of sexy, I would say. And I'll just show you what I mean. So let's say we're going to the primitives, and here we have in our layouts. So first thing that you'll have to do if you want to use this style components and style system approach is first add the code to make the style components work. It's nicely documented in their website, so it's just fine. You basically, instead of using the components coming from React Native, you'll just use the ones exported by their library, or you wrap them up in their HOCs. And then on top of those style components, you add the style system, which is basically this chunk over here, where you define all the parameters that you want to modify, to easily modify on that component, so that when you will want to modify a base primitive that you've implemented that way, let's say one of them would be this column thing, where I just predefined that the flex direction should be column. So if I want to define, let's say, a red box with green background and border, I don't know what radius, you can simply do it like, let's say, red box with, I don't know, red box with, I don't know what. You can just do it like this. Bam, and you return it. You use the column you just implemented, and then all the attributes you're just doing, like for the border, for example, you're just doing 1px solid red, and for the background, you're doing something like green. I said green, and then you can also do the border radius and stuff like that. And for those of you, again, familiar with the React Native way of styling components, this is kind of a game changer, at least for me when I discovered it, because you can style your components the same way you would on the web. You don't have to keep researching that whole JSX way of styling them. So yeah, and if you want to further use this component as a basis for another styled one, you can simply do something like export, I don't know, C1, and you can just wrap it in the style wrapper, and that's bam, and you can further define whatever other styles on top of that you need. And just to show you how an actual components looks like with all these primitives implemented, let me just see. So, and the components, this, for example, a big article card. And the beauty of this is that you don't need to run anything, and you can basically visualize the whole component. So here you can see you have a column with a white background, some padding, some border radius, and inside that there's a row with an image, and another row with an icon button, and another row with some text, and then some kind of a button there. So it's really easy to get like the whole sense of it if you're new on a project, and especially because you can see like all the styling and everything right on top without having to search through all kinds of files and stuff like that. And plus, style system and style components also allow you to define a lot of default states, so that helps a lot with the consistency part. And yeah, I think this should cover it when it comes to styling the components. And the final touch, and also maybe a final topic, is actually some kind of a front-end documentation that I've started to personally keep. And it's a more simple and more atypical, I would say, documentation, because it doesn't explain a lot. It's not too hard to maintain. It's actually a few seconds. So what I basically like to do is, let's say I've implemented this form here, and after I've implemented it, I just go to the design and take a quick screenshot of the form, and then I just put that screenshot in some kind of a top-level file, and I'm maintaining this kind of markdown file where I'm putting, just to show you in perspective, where I'm putting the component name, the path to it in the code, and the actual screenshot to it. And this results in something really nice. Let me just show you the preview of the markdown file. You'll have this kind of a documentation, and I know it's ugly. I know there are a lot of other options, But this is very, very simple. And from the perspective of someone that's totally new to the code base, and I'm just coming in and trying to figure out where the hell the components are or how to build my screen, I can very easily say I'm on this screen, right? And I'm totally new to the project. I have no idea what's happening, and I have to implement it. So, okay, how do I know what components I already have implemented? How do I know what I should implement? I just take a quick look over here. Oh, look, this looks kind of familiar to what I need. So it's kind of some kind of a form. It looks like this one. So let's see what the actual code is. This is the code. This is the actual props to it. That's how I use it. And I can just go with it. And this is so simple to maintain, like just adding one new row to this whole markdown file and just modifying the actual screenshot and the path to the component. It literally takes, after you got used to it, it takes like 15 seconds. And I think, I wouldn't say I would use the fit, but I would do a lot for someone that would introduce me to a project with not spectacular and big documentation, but just something like this, where I can see what components are already implemented, where they are, and how they actually look. And yeah, this is just for the sake of the example. This is a more complete one. Yeah. And here there are a lot of components, and just looking overall at the design and coming to this file, and you have to implement some kind of form or some kind of page where you have no idea how to wrap your head around. Just take a look here, see what looks similar to what you need to do, look in the code, and just like start using it and go for it. And yeah, let me just check my agenda, make sure that I didn't miss anything. I probably did, but yeah. And with this little documentation, again, I know there's storybook. I know there's what Matt's already mentioned. I know there are a lot of more complex and more complete solutions, but there's just, when it comes to documentation, but there's just this little magic of having a simple document like this that I can just like navigate to whatever component I want and see how to use it and what's actually happening there. And yeah, on this little magic note, I'd like to, I think, end my talk. I was too inconsiderate to also add a footer page in this Canva thing. But yeah, thanks a lot for your attention. I hope at least I give you some kind of a perspective, even though a more primitive one than what the other guys are talking about. And yeah, if this still stirred any curiosities or any questions for you, I'm here to answer. Thanks a lot. And yeah, that was pretty much it. Sarah, you're muted.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you. I was being a decent human being. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. You're so considerate.
Thank you. Think you could make it better by making it a JSON file.
I'll consider that.
Just think about that.
Yeah.
And also, I thank you so much for your talk, because a lot of the talks usually focus on something that is not applicable right now. Like right now, if your team is under a lot of pressure, you can't just spin up a storybook or spin up whatever you need to spin up. And this is already helpful for a team that's already has a lot of stuff under pressure. It's like, just make a markdown file. Like that would be really helpful. And I also want to point out that a lot of there is such a thing as too much documentation, which is the opposite of what you want to create, where you get to a project and there is so much documentation that your brain just cannot handle it. It's just too much that you just ignore everything. And then at the end, you're like, why didn't you read the documentation? I was like, because there was 10 pages of it. I have ADHD. I can't do this. You have to give me a video. This is way too much. I just need a link. Yeah. So I do think there's a lot of beauty in trying to boil things down to the most essential things and just give people the most essential things. And if they want to build on that, then if they have time, then they do it. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Also, love Stout system. 10 out of 10. Just to use it a code sandbox. Love it.
Yeah, I like the approach a lot. I've been using it for a couple of years, and it's really cool to like push everything behind these primitives. You don't have to worry about HTML, and you get really nice API. So it just came to my mind that in the previous session we discussed this tool called I think it's Witshot or Witshot. How do you pronounce it? Witshot.
Witshot.
Yeah, Witshot. It's a tool that can generate screenshots. So then I started thinking maybe with the screenshot thing, if you do manual screenshots,
How
I
do you
guess
spell it? I'm sorry.
Vid
Vid shots, like vids, like
so
the building thing. Oh, it doesn't
Ah.
work on React Native though.
Yeah, but I mean, if you can get, I mean, that's how you write it. You can check out the previous session, but I was thinking maybe a cool way to do it in some cases will be that you will generate these screenshots on change. So because I think you can get some kind of selector. So if you have a page where you show the layout and you have a selector, you could point to the right spot and then crop. Have some little thing just to generate the things. I think it's really cool way to document what you have.
That would be really cool. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I think you can. I think you can do it, and maybe we can collaborate with Francois on that because it's a cool idea to have this kind of like overview of what you have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He also wants to make it work on React Native, maybe. So that would be a good thing to collaborate on. I think that is a very good nice stuff to make it even faster to create, and also like it's more consistent, the size of the screenshots and everything.
That's something we'll have to work on. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. Like people are just gonna make different screenshots on different devices at different times. Yeah. Some of them have like the weird box shadow that Macs have, and then there's like 100 pixels of padding on the side. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh well, definitely. Always things can always be improved. So yeah, but that's definitely a good idea. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I think that would integrate really nice. Does anyone else have any questions, any thoughts? I just want to say that I really appreciated your talk because you brought us back most to the fundamentals, and it still taught us about design. Fuck, I forgot the name now. The styling library.
The style system, style components. Yeah.
It's so useful. Style system is so useful. I know there's a lot of discussion of like, should the styles be in the component definition? I'm like, I don't care. It's nice to use. I like it. Like, I think in the end, it's like, do you like it? Is it easier to use and does it make more sense? Yes, then just let it be. Just let it be.
It was also love at first sight for me as well. So yeah.
Every time I actually manually have to type display flex in a style component, part of me cries. I'm like, just use style system. Why do I have to write display flex? I could just write flex.
Yep, exactly.
It would just be there, and I don't have to like control click to try and find where the display flex is.
Absolutely. Yep.
And when you add aliases and you can't even find it. Yeah, I'm just making up talk right now. But yeah, I really liked your talk. Thank you so much, Dragos.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot too.
We'll then move on to our last talk, which is going to be, I was going to say it's going to be about Juri, but I think it's going to be about NX by Juri.
Mostly,
yeah. Good luck, man.
All right, let's get it started. I'm super excited to be here this year at React Finland. And what I would like to talk about today is a bit about React in combination with NX. And so first of all, who am I? My name is Juri Strumpflohner. I'm a Google Web expert in web technologies, also an instructor at Egghead and Cypress ambassador. And right now I work at Novel as a JavaScript architect and engineering manager. And as part of that, I'm also a member of the NX core team. And so NX is our open source development toolkit, specifically for monorepos, but not necessarily. So what that means is you can also get started small, use NX and use its features to accelerate your development basically. But as you grow then, it will also be their NX basically in the sense of it has a lot of scalability feature and it works really well as you get large and more enterprisey. So in terms of that, basically here are the main links. There's our nx.dev website and also our GitHub repository where you can contribute or open issues and connect with us. But let's not waste further words. I have already installed NX and basically created my workspace, but you can do that by just like executing NX create workspace, give it a name. I've called it React Courses, I think. And then hit enter, and that will walk you through a couple different steps to set up the workspace in the most optimal way. What you will see then is what we have here. So you have that apps and libs folders, which is kind of our recommended way of setting it up. which means like you have the whole logic, which you usually would have like in your folders of the application in different libraries, and we will see why. And then you have like a very thin layer of applications. So the application really is just like bundling together different libraries and building them and deploying them. So that's what applications do. So let's have a look. Right now here we have already an app generated, which is a React application. So let's first of all see how to launch that. Now I'm using yarn nx, like prefixing it with yarn or npx, because like I don't have nx installed globally. And so that will take the local installed version in the workspace. And then I can just use serve to serve up the app. And courses is the name of the application, so it will be nx serve courses. And so once that gets started, we'll see at localhost 4200 our template being rendered out. Now let's create straight a library, because let's say we want to develop a small course item, so basically the preview of a course within our course platform. So to generate a library, we use generators that come with nx. And so you can use the nx generate command, or G for short. I used the now React package and the library lib, which is the name of the generator. And I call the library course item. Hitting enter will then generate that library, which you can find here now in the libs folder. It has already things like jest set up for it, properly configured Babel, and also generated a small component, which doesn't really anything interesting other than printing out the name. You can also already see that index.ts here. And the index.ts basically is your public API. So everything that gets exported here is public, while everything that remains within a lib folder, so it doesn't get exported, is private. And so again, this is for scalability really. So when you have a lot of team members, you want to control what others can use from your library and what is private and can be then changed very easily. Another interesting part here is that in the tsconfig, we have already such a path mapping set up. And this is cool because then we don't have to use like relative paths to get like the items imported, like the libraries imported, but we can use something that is similar to what we would use when we publish it to NPM, right? And so let's straight try this out and go to the app.tsx file here. And let's actually import that course item component, which we just generated. And I have now that React courses course item here, which we have just seen. And I import a course item. And let's also add it just here after the header. Now let's serve our app again. And so once that is up again, we should see here our component being rendered. And in fact, like it happens here. So this is how it is being visualized then. Now behind the scenes, what NX does is, which is another basically core part of NX, is the dependency graph. So it kind of knows the structure of your workspace, which allows NX to kind of make a lot of optimizations. And we can actually visualize that graph. So we can use NX dep graph to visualize the changes that happened so far. And so what you can see here, NX identifies those square boxes, which are the applications, and the round ones are the libraries. And so NX already understood that based on this import, which you created here, it has a relationship between courses to course item, right? So let me start this with the watch command. So we'll see this grow over time. All right, let's create a couple libraries. I'm using again that NX generate command. Now let's say we create some utility library. So I'm using now a workspace library, because those are just like TypeScript setup, no UI specific things in there. Let's call this core. So this could be like utility functions. It could also be kind of authentication stuff, although we would probably have like a different one for that. And so you see that core library pop up. We could also generate just another library as we did before for React. Let's call this coupons, which are coupons that we use in our maybe online course platform. So you can see those pop up here and visualize. And now let's connect them. Let's go, for instance, to the course item and import our core library, because like those might contain some core functionalities. And so I use React Courses core. You can see I can import it the very same way as I did before. Now this is just a function that gets exported there. So I just invoke it in order to create kind of that relationship. And let me also do that for the coupons component that just got created. And so again, I would use here React courses core, and here the core function, and import it here. All right, so now once I connect these, you can also see them being reflected in a dependency graph. Now, having these relationships, once you create more of them, you might even see that there's benefit in creating different applications. So let's say like we start with one React application, but at some point we see it might make sense to have a public facing app, which is more optimized for that part in terms of SEO, static rendering, while we have more of the management part on the backend side, which is like just a React application, right? And so adding, for instance, now or next for creating a next application might be a good thing to do, right? So I'm just installing here now or next, which will add Next.js support to our NX workspace very easily. And so here this gets installed. And once this is installed, what I will get is a set of new generators to create Next specific libraries and applications. Now, if you don't know the commands out of the box, you can also use NX Console, which is a Visual Studio Code plugin, to explore those commands. And so if I click here, generate, you can see that we have now those next commands available. And so let's say I create an application. Let's call that public, because this is our public facing platform basically. And now the cool part is, or the important part is, like I can reuse the existing libraries which I created. So for instance, here I can go to the public pages. And let's go into the index.ts and just import the course item component as I did before, right? So I'm using React course item here, and I use the course item. And again, let's import this here just before the link section. And so this will add now my core, like I would use my course items now also in the Next.js application. As you can see now the graph quite changed because now we have the next app here and both of them use the course item down here while the coupons is still there, not being used by an application. Now let's start the next app. Again, you can see I use the same command as for my React application. I don't have to learn something new in the sense of learn Next.js specific commands, but I can use the same ones I am already accustomed for my React stuff. And so if I refresh here, we can now see our Next.js application being rendered. So this public one, it has also our course item. And so now this is a statically rendered page potentially, right? Using the same component which we had in React, which is really powerful. And this shows you kind of the code sharing that is possible within NX. Similarly, what you also could do is just add things on top. So let's say, for instance, we want to create Storybook for our course item, right? Because that is our UI library, and we want to have Storybook for individually creating those components in there and testing them. And so adding Storybook is actually pretty easy. Let me use here the generate from NX console, and let's search for Storybook. And I can use that Storybook configuration to set up Storybook. The name of the library where I want to add it is course item. I can also say like configure Cypress for me, generate Cypress specs, also generate stories for the existing components, and then just run it. So this now installs Storybook. Make sure you have the correct versions. If you use Webpack 5, it will also use Webpack 5 underneath for Storybook, and it sets it up basically for you. So if you go again in the meantime while it's generating into our library here, you will see now the course item got a Storybook folder, which has it already pre-configured. It also uses an hour specific preset to make sure things are set up in a proper way. And it also starts generating stories for our existing components. So we have already that course item component from before, and so it added a story to that. And so once this then finishes installing, what I can do is I can launch it directly again with NX Storybook, which is the command for launching Storybook, course item, which is the library where we added Storybook on top of it. And so this will now load Storybook on top of our library. And you can see the whole process is really straightforward, right? Like that's the power of those generators. Like they get you moving really, really fast without having to worry too much about how to set up Storybook with TypeScript, how to make sure it has the same underlying Webpack config as your React application, and all those things basically. right? And so if we now go to localhost 400, which is where Storybook is, we can see our course item being rendered in there, right? So to conclude, I would show you still like some very cool features in terms of scalability, right? I mentioned like once you grow, and for that, let me first comment this really quick, is once you grow, you have like a lot of libraries in there. And there are some scalability things that need to be applied in order to make sure that the builds and test runs are still fast on CI. So I have committed this, and let me create a new feature branch. Let's call it feature X. And let's assume I make a change in that course item. And so let me go to the course item component and let me add some p tag in there. And let's commit this. Let's add here new feature, which is a new feature which I've added. Now I can run tests, for instance, individually by just doing nx test similar to nx serve course item, and that will now use the pre-configured jest setup for that library, execute the jest test on top of it. Again, as I mentioned, like in theory, now that I've changed course item, I want to make sure I didn't break anything else within my workspace, right? And so I would have to execute all the tests. Now, obviously, that doesn't really scale. And so NX uses the dependency graph to figure out what it actually needs to test, build, lint, whatever you want to specify. And for that, it has those affected commands. And so I can use NX affected, and let's actually use it on the dep graph. So if I run NX affected dependency graph, what it does, it shows me basically what needs to be executed in terms of like building, testing, linting, and so on, based on the changes that happened on Git with the difference of the main branch and the feature branch, right? And so it currently identified that what I changed is the course item. And so therefore I need to change basically or execute all these nodes up there, right? If I select all of them, you can see that those here in black are not being executed. And so instead of the dep graph, I can actually use a target, which can be building, whatever. In our case, let's use tests. I can even add a parallel here, so to execute those tests in parallel. And so you can see these are the projects that NX identified should be executed. And it executes all of them. The interesting part is also if I rerun them, like execute a command again, you will see it's immediate, like it's instant, much faster than before, right? And what you see here as an output here is NX read these from a cache. And that's another thing that kicks in here, which is the computation cache. So basically only those things are being re-executed that actually changed. We can see that, for instance, if I go to the courses library, and let's go to the app of the courses here. And let's just here add another change. Right, so we changed basically that course up there, but from a Git perspective, we actually in that feature branch changed still the course item piece up there. Now, if I re-execute the tests again, you will see what happens now. NX still identifies those 3 items, but in the end, you can see 2 of them are getting cached because we didn't really change them, right? Like we didn't change course item in public since the last run, but just courses. And so you can kind of understand like how this scales up as you get bigger. It makes still sure that on CI and even locally, things are kind of working fast even in a large environment. And you could even take this further. Now this cache is just local to your machine, but you can take it further and use, for instance, NX Cloud on top of it to distribute it among your team members. So basically, to conclude this a bit, since we're running out of time, it's like we have talked about a couple of things now, right? Like about apps and libraries. You can understand now what those are. The dependency graph, the scaffolding abilities, like we quickly seen Jest and Storybook, how that can work. And also some of the speed improvements you get, which even are beneficial in small environments, but obviously get much more beneficial as you grow up, which are the affected commands and the distributed caching. Now, if you want to go deeper, because like we really just like scratch the surface here, I highly recommend to take a look at that ACAD course which I've created, which is Scale React Development with NX, which is completely free for the community. And that's an opportunity to really go deep on some of those topics. This is like 24 lessons, 1.5 hours of content, which goes much more deeper in code sharing abilities, even kind of restricting dependencies with like linting rules and much more. So definitely check those out. Here are some cool links or important links if you want to dive deeper. There's an our YouTube channel with office hours where you can chime in, or a community Slack to find out more about NX. I'm happy to take your questions, so feel free to DM me on Twitter, directly message me on Twitter, or just like ask your questions now. Thanks.
That was awesome, and I share this. I heard about NX. This is the first time I saw it, like in general, and really good job selling it. It sounds like it really helps with scalability. We have a question from the organizer himself. Would you like to come here, or would you like me to ask your?
Okay, I will join you. So just a couple of questions. I mean, I've been working with Lerna a lot. I guess the first one is how do you differ from Lerna? Like, what's the core point?
Yeah, like there are probably a couple of differences. Like the main thing about NX in general is like, for instance, like in terms of the version policy or upgrade policy, like we follow the one version policy, like in a sense of having one node managed folders within an NX workspace. So that also means that like if you have different applications and you upgrade React, for instance, that you upgrade them for all of them, right? Which obviously means like there's a bit more, like if you want maintenance as you go, right? But we figured like if you upgrade React, for instance, right, you have like your workspace and you should have lots of tests and automated tests to make sure that things work. Then like in the upgrade process, it will be much easier to fix things, right? Like which are related to upgrading breakages or stuff like that. And it's also a bit like what like companies such as Google or Microsoft usually follow in their monorepo, like those one version policies. And so that's what we have in NX as well. And then if you want to go into more the core differences, obviously it's like with the dependency graph, which I've shown, we can optimize a lot of things much in a more optimal way, right? In the sense that knowing the structure which is underneath allows you to kind of take short paths, right? Like in terms of what do you need to rebuild, what needs to be retested, right? And you can really extend this as well, right? I mentioned, for instance, building, testing, and linting. Like those are the default setups which we generate in a project, but you can add your own targets, right? Like maybe you need to do some very custom operations, so you can just like add those in as well. And they work also with Affected at that point, and also with the whole caching, which is then on top of the Affected, if you want, again, right? So I think like the speed improvements, especially if you have to scale up, that's one of the main differentiators. And because like with that dependency graph, we are able to do a lot of those improvements, right? And we have seen those are definitely necessary. Like they are not necessary as your start, but like in bigger enterprises, which they might have like 20, 30 applications in there and hundreds of libraries, then you cannot really build everything right from scratch, right? So you have to have a system that allows you on CI, you're still fast, because like if you're slow on CI, that becomes a problem, right? Because like that becomes really a productivity problem also in terms of the teams that work on the monorepo.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's sort of related to my next question. Like, what are your advantage over monolith? Because what normally happens, someone picks up create React app, then they start developing the app, and it just grows and grows. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the like I think like that's what I kind of hinted in the beginning when I talked about like different levels of scaling, right? Like there's the scaling which I just mentioned, which is in terms of like build speed and those kind of scalings, right? To make sure on CI we're fast. And the other thing is like scaling in terms of like code organization and structure, right? To make sure your architecture itself is scalable. And what I showed like in the talk is like that difference between apps and libs is something initially people sometimes struggle a bit because like it's kind of a different mental model, like if you start thinking about it. But like the idea or what we usually do when we develop like large workspace with NX is like the apps are really just like the deployables, right? So there's no logic, like just like very little coordination logic in there, but the main feature logic sits in those libraries, right? And it's also because like libraries don't necessarily need to be shared, right? They can also be specific to an application, but still by splitting them up, basically. So probably in the most naive way, you could take your folders, which you have like in your Create React app, and like move them down into separate libraries, right? But by splitting those up, the boundaries have to be defined much in a more clear way, right? So you have those like index.ts file, which I mentioned, like your public API, which you would have like in an NPM library, for instance, right? So you have to think about like, what do I want to expose? What do I don't want to expose to other developers on my team, right? And so you can gradually open up, right? So you can start with some very closed set of like public APIs for a given feature library and then expand as you go. And I think like that helps a lot to think about in terms of architecture stuff, right? To make sure that you scale also that aspect, right?
Yeah, so I have one final question before I let others ask something as well. So what's your approach for dealing with like this package or tooling upgrades? Because we're dealing with JavaScript, and if you leave the project for 1 month, it's already somehow outdated. So how do you deal with it?
Yeah, so what we have, for instance, is also automatic migrations. So when you basically migrate, first of all, we migrate NX itself for you, right? So there's a specific command which is called NX migrate, which allows you to go from one version to the next. And so specifically for the packages which we support as terms of our core plugins, which is React, Angular, Next.js, and a couple others, right? We make sure that the combinations work, right? So what you do is like you upgrade NX, and with that we upgrade our own tooling. We change potential breaking changes in the source folders or in configuration files. We migrate that over for you by changing the actual code underneath, right? And so that has proven to work very nicely because it's like, especially being done in a monorepo, you just like fork in a branch, right? You create a new branch, you run the migration, you make sure you upgrade everything, you run the application, then you run it through your CI pipeline, right? Which at that point would then execute all the end-to-end tests and unit tests and stuff, make sure things still work properly, right?
Yeah, so like
that's
for
usually...
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for something like let's say Storybook, commonly used in React projects, you sort of own the concern. So if I upgrade the normal thing of Storybook, I mean, I just get the newest version of what you have. I don't have to worry about it myself, right? So you own this concern. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. For some of the main, like, because our goal is obviously to improve the developer ergonomics in general, right? And so for some of the main features or main plugins that are usually used in combination with those libraries, we take care of it. And so we make sure that they work when we upgrade, and that we upgrade it for the people, right? We obviously don't own the entire Storybook experience, right? Like, it's still an external package, but like those points where it integrates with NX, we make sure we like pull it along. So especially like which I mentioned, like when you upgrade React to Webpack 5, or we had a similar scenario, for instance, for the Angular workspace, which we supported, we made sure that we also upgrade Storybook. We even collaborate with Storybook forks to make sure like those combinations of Angular Webpack 5 and Storybook Webpack 5 works, right? And so that experience is granted. Obviously, third-party libraries, others that you add like as you go into development, those need to be taken care of by the developer itself, of course.
That sounds good, because it's really sort of painful to keep track of all the things that are changing all the time. So if you can reduce the amount of work that's going to that, it's good. Yeah. So in a recent client project, what I did, I actually wrote a package that owns all the testing setup. It owns some of the, I think, the Webpack setup, Karma setup, Jest setup, Prettier, authentication. It's a lot of concerns, and a sort of meta concerns, but you need these concerns in every single package, in every single project we have. So we have monorepo and multiple other GitHub repositories. And in the end, doing this one package using a tool called MRM. So I use MRM to patch your package.json and other stuff. It's a real time saver, because I sort of own this ugly stuff that still has to be maintained. I don't have it split up across projects. So it sounds like your solution, it's doing something similar, and maybe and even much more. And I think it's a good approach, because what you want to like push these ugly concerns to one place out of the site. You don't want to deal with it every day. So.
Yeah, exactly. The main point is like you shouldn't have to worry too much about the whole configuration stuff, right? So that's being set up for you, right? For instance, as we mentioned before, right, like setting up Storybook, which I've shown very briefly, just right due to time constraints, but like or Cypress as well, right? Like usually what happens, like developers are in a hurry, right? Like you have to finish that feature, and like a Cypress test on top of that library would help, right? But like just thinking about like, okay, now I have to check quickly how to set up Cypress. Well, now I'm also using TypeScript in a workspace, so how would it work with that, right? And so you have like all those concerns, and you just like push it away, even though it would just take you maybe half an hour. But just like you thought about like having to do all this, like in the stress of doing the actual feature work, you just push it away, right? And so with those generators, yeah, exactly. And those generators just set it up for you and make sure that collaboration with the project in Cypress works. Right, so you have it already there. Now you obviously need to write a test, right? I mean, we generate even one, but that's like just a very high-level scaffold, of course. But yeah, I see like that's one of the main benefits in general.
So, does anyone else have any questions or should we start wrapping up because there's nothing on YouTube?
If I can
Yeah.
can plug something very quickly.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have
yeah.
an
Sure.
NX,
Yeah,
NX
sure.
specific conf coming up in 2 weeks on September 16th and 17th. It's completely free. So just like go to nx.dev/conf. So if
Nice.
you're curious, like we have a lot of talks there, specifically obviously on NX and how you can use it in various environments. We also
Yeah.
support React Native, and like there's active work going on there to make sure those integrations also work nicely. So if someone is interested, definitely check that out.
Yeah, sure. I will
Nice.
share it with people so they find it.
Yep.
Oh.
Nice. Okay.
Well, thanks.
Okay, so I can say I can say whatever I want, but I would say that we can wrap up and go to the takeaways that we got from this hour and 20 minutes. I would say we can still go counterclockwise, Juri, and you can go first. Like, what was one thing that you are definitely taking home today? I mean, you're already home, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm already home. Like, what I take
Yeah,
back to my
same.
kitchen afterwards, basically.
Yes.
No, I really like the round of talks, like especially as I mentioned before, like the whole design systems, because that's something which I see it in client work which we do, right? And not super actively involved in that in the environment, but like since we touch storybooks, since we touch like those libraries and setups, like setting up design libraries with X is like a very common use case.
Yeah.
And so I figured like those points have been covered very nice. So that was a good takeaway for me, like in terms of like refreshing things. Also from Dragos talk, in the sense of like simple is often very effective, right? Like don't just like blow everything up to the like most complex thing, but just start simple and then expand as you really need it. So some really cool insights. And I should check out React Native. I've not done too much work in that, but like sounds
It's quite cool.
interesting.
Yeah, it's quite cool. I can endorse it. Yeah.
Dragos?
That means anything, yeah. Well, I have definitely noted down to do some more research on the design system and how do you call them? Design. Yeah, it escapes me. On your whole topic, Mass, because it's, as you saw, my approach is kind of more bare bones, maybe, so that would notch up like my next level. And after I see your what we were talking was about the design systems, then I also check out the NX, because I didn't actually hear about this library until now. I don't know why. But yeah, my approach is usually just go full monolith until everything is way too big to to be managed. So that's also, it was a very, let's say, useful and educational 1.5 hours for me. So thanks a lot, guys, for that.
Mads?
Yeah, I discovered a lot of tools, so that's pretty cool. That I never heard before, or just forgot in the rush of our everyday and this kind of JavaScript ecosystem that is modeling really fast every day. But a thing I think is especially present in all our talks is that we as developers are really good to build tools and focus on tools, and tools are sometimes often the biggest reply to everything that we have. But having the interest in developer experience and having some simpler approaches or biggest tools that wrap everything for us, just to improve our own experience and just focus on development, what we are supposed to do, and just not configuring tools every day and every time I want to wrap up a new project is definitely a good thing, where we have a brilliant future in front of us. So let's go in this direction. This is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, my two main takeaways are that I need to check out NX, and I will check out the Egghead course, because they're usually super nice. We'll definitely check that out. It looks super useful to start building stuff like bigger stuff. And I think I've also realized that like a lot of the times we're just overthinking stuff for no reason, where we can just do something, and that something is already better than nothing. I think that is definitely a problem that exists in developers, and it's either this amazing thing that I have in my head, or it's nothing. And a lot of the times, like literally anything is better than what you have now, because what we have now is nothing. And I think it's something that we all kind of need to learn, me included, definitely me included. Yeah. Okay,
And
so
use
I
JSON files for
And
everything.
just to
we
add
use
the third-
JSON files.
Yeah, exactly. That was it. That was it. We almost forgot.
Y'all think I'm kidding, but it's like honestly, JSON files.
let's sign the petition. I'm in.
Let's end it with use JSON. Don't overthink it. If it can be a JSON, make it a JSON file. No need to make it a JavaScript file. There's absolutely no need. Okay, so we are done for now. We are gonna have a 30-minute break. I'm gonna get lunch. I think everyone in this call is probably gonna get lunch. Matt is looking at me like, no, I've already eaten. Well, fine, I'm gonna get lunch. And it's gonna be great. So yeah, see you all in 30 minutes, and thank you all of you for coming. It was really nice. Learned a lot, and it was really nice talks. Thank you.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Have a good day.